Welcome to the Daily Dispatch. Firstly, we'll bring you news of an Israeli airstrike in Syria, putting the Damascus airport out of service. Then, we'll take you to economic outlooks as the IMF chief signals 2023 will be much tougher than 2022 for the global economy. And for our last headline, we'll be covering developments at NATO as Germany takes over command of the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force. We're here to give you news and to help you infer the world around you. I'm Usama Nizamani, and here's your Daily Dispatch. First up, Syrian military claims Israel carried out missile attacks last night, targeting the Damascus International Airport. The attack resulted in the death of 2 Syrian soldiers and put the airport out of service temporarily. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a UK-based monitoring group, has reported beside targeting the airport, the missiles also hit an arms depot south of the city and have put the death figure at 4. Israel has yet to comment on these strikes. Syria has condemned these strikes in the past, calling them a violation of its sovereignty. However, it has never retaliated militarily. When a peaceful and non-violent movement in 2011 in Syria soon descended into a civil war, it drew in transnational terrorist groups like Islamic State, as well as regional and international powers who supported different parties in the conflict to serve their geopolitical interests. Iran and Russia supported the Syrian government, the former sending in militias, while the latter intervened militarily in 2015 to protect its ally. Meanwhile, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey supported different opposition and militant groups fighting against the Assad regime, and the US provided aerial support to Kurdish forces in the north and east of Syria against the IS. Israel has undertaken numerous aerial strikes in Syria since 2013 against armed depots, Syrian military installations, and alleged Iranian-supported military groups like Hezbollah. Last year, it carried out around 30 aerial raids in Syria. This latest attack, the first ever Benjamin Netanyahu took office, underscores growing Israel-Iran tensions in the region. Tel Aviv has accused Tehran of supporting militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah in the region and pursuing nuclear weapons, promising to target both of them, while Iran has blamed Israel for trying to trigger a war against Iran through such provocative attacks, carrying out the assassination of nuclear scientists and threatening to undertake aerial strikes against Iranian nuclear installations. On to our next dispatch. The IMF head Kristalina Georgieva has warned a third of the global economy will be in recession in the year 2023. The projection comes against the backdrop of slow economic activity for China, the United States, and Europe, the main global engines for global economic activity. While speaking to CBS Sunday Morning, she warned 2023 will be tougher than the year we leave behind. Last October, in 2022, IMF scaled down its outlook for global economic growth in 2023, identifying the war in Ukraine, inflationary pressures, and higher interest rates by central banks to bring pressure from rising prices under control as the main sources for a bleak economic outlook in 2023. China has also recently scrapped its zero-COVID policy and started to reopen its economy, even as coronavirus infections continue to rise. Experts believe that manufacturing for products such as Tesla and Apple may get back on track. However, the first few months until March might see disruptions due to the infections and the readjustment of supply chains. In his New Year's address, Chinese President Xi Jinping has also called for more effort and unity as the country enters a new phase. And while the United States is expected to perform relatively resiliently in 2023, the downturn there would also mean lower demand for products made throughout Asia, including India, Thailand, and Vietnam. The IMF had also warned that with the impact of the war in Ukraine, half of the EU is expected to face a recession. This mostly comes against the backdrop of the sanctions of the EU imposed on Russia and the search for alternative sources to energy. to balance its much-needed demand for energy to continue economic activity. And while the EU extended a credit line of 4 billion euros to accommodate refugees fleeing the war in 2022, hosting refugees could cost in excess of 40 billion euros for European countries. Overall, higher interest rates by central banks also mean that investors will be less inclined in expanding their businesses internationally. Due to a downturn in demand, investors may pull out their capital from different economies, which could affect their capacity to import food and energy items. Similarly, coupled with slower economic growth and steadily rising demand for food and energy supplies, could also trigger the depreciation of developing economies' currencies. Taking you to our next feature, Germany has officially taken over NATO's Very High Readiness Joint Task Force from France for the year 2023. The command of the VJTF rotates on an annual basis among NATO member states. The VJTF was formed in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and was headed by France. The task force is the highest readiness element of NATO response force, and in 2023, its land forces will comprise around 11,500 troops. These forces are prepared for deployment within days, and the VJTF currently has land forces deployed in Romania, with additional support from air and special forces on a needs-be basis. This deployment was led by France and was a response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February last year. It's good to remember, NATO was established during the height of the Cold War to curb Soviet expansion into Western Europe. Since its inception, NATO has maintained that it is a deterrent and defensive force aimed at the collective defense of member and allied states. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has categorically implicated NATO as a participant in the ongoing hostilities with Ukraine, with a possible expansion of NATO membership to Ukraine marked as one of the contributing factors to Russia's launch of hostilities against the NATO partner state. And the alliance, long viewed by security experts as one in decline, has seen an uptick since the Russia-Ukraine war has taken center stage in Europe. And a significant development, the NATO strategic concept adopted earlier this year, a decade since its former iteration, earmarked the Russian Federation as the biggest threat to the security of the Allies. The strategic concept also stated ambitions to work together to counter terrorism, counter challenges posed by China's ambitions, as well as facing global and interconnected challenges like climate change, emerging and disruptive technologies, and the erosion of the arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation architecture. An expert suggested a shift from the trends of the previous decade. The new crisis has pushed NATO into the spotlight, with closer cooperation visible between the US and Europe, a previously waning relationship in the aftermath of the exit from Afghanistan, and long-developing strategic divergences between the two parties. On to more highlights from around the world. On Sunday, a terrorist attack outside the Kabul airport in Afghanistan left multiple people dead and caused damage to the infrastructure. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. However, the Islamic State Khorasan has increased its attacks, including on schools, minorities, and worship places, since the withdrawal of international forces from Afghanistan in August 2021. An affiliate of the Islamic State from the Middle East, ISK, has emerged as the biggest threat to internal peace in Afghanistan. In a change of tactics, it recently targeted a hotel frequented by Chinese in Kabul, leading to speculations of ISK's growing links with East Turkestan Islamic movement, which is fighting to establish an independent state in Xinjiang region. These attacks have raised concerns about peace and stability in Afghanistan, which is already going through a humanitarian crisis due to sanctions and lack of international recognition, and the Afghan Taliban's ability to fulfill its promises not to allow terrorist groups safe havens in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Pakistan has also highlighted the growing presence of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in the border regions of Afghanistan, from where they plan cross-border attacks inside Pakistan. Pakistan has witnessed an increased number of attacks by TTP in recent months, raising fears of a resurgence of the terrorist organization. Moving to the subcontinent, in keeping with bilateral agreements between the two states, Pakistan and India have exchanged a list of nuclear installations with one another. The agreement on prohibition of attacks against nuclear installations and facilities mandates both states to share this information to curb accidental escalation and maintain lines of communication between the two countries to ensure regular communication on risk reduction, regardless of the state of overall relations at the time. Both countries have also shared lists of prisoners in custody at the moment. Under the 2008 Agreement on Consular Access, the lists include 705 Indian prisoners detained in Pakistan, including 51 civilian prisoners and 654 fishermen, and 434 Pakistani prisoners in India, including 339 civilian prisoners and 95 fishermen. The Foreign Office also confirmed raising a request for the release and repatriation of its 51 civilian prisoners and 94 fishermen, whose prison terms have been completed and whose nationalities remain confirmed. While diplomatic relations between the two countries remain strained over India's military and political excesses in Kashmir, these agreements create space for strategic engagement and help foster trust between the two countries. Lastly, Croatia has taken two significant steps to become a fully integrated member of the European Union. On Sunday, Croatia entered the passport-free Schengen system, its 27th member, and also became a part of the Eurozone. Croatia was part of the former Yugoslavia and became an independent state in the 1990s. It joined the European Union in 2013. Celebrating the decision, the Prime Minister of Croatia, Andrej Plenković, said, "This is a day for the history books." Experts say the adoption of the euro and passport-free Schengen system will help Zagreb's economy, which has seen an inflation of over 13% in recent months, and boost its tourism industry. This latest development is also being seen as a testament to the success of the economic and regional integration model of the EU, which has come under strain in the last decade. First, due to economic crisis in Spain, Germany, and Italy that highlighted growing economic and power asymmetry in the continent, and then to Brexit. In recent years, multiple parties in Germany, Italy, and other member states invoking nationalist sentiments have campaigned against the EU and call for coming out of it. That's all, folks. We look forward to your suggestions and feedback. We'll be back tomorrow with more bite-sized news that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the country, the region, and the globe. I'm Usama Nizamani, and this was your Daily Dispatch.